If you're waiting for your brain to get sharper on its own, you may already be falling behind. Not because you're aging, not because you're losing it, not because something is wrong with you, but because your brain follows one simple rule. Use it or lose it. And here's the challenge. Most people spend years trying to train their body while completely ignoring the system that controls it. They want better focus, better memory, better energy, better decision making, more creativity, more confidence, but they really train the organ responsible for all of it, the brain. Here is the good news. Your brain remains adaptable far longer than most people realize. The bad news, adaptation doesn't happen because you hope for it. It happens because you create the right experiences. And that's exactly what we're talking about today, because some of the most powerful ways to sharpen your mind have nothing to do with brain games, nothing to do with crossword puzzles, and nothing to do with sitting still trying to think harder. In fact, some of these exercises I'll show you today might seem surprisingly simple, but underneath them, a powerful neurological principle that influences attention, memory, learning, decision-making, and ultimately your long-term longevity. For example, mental sharpness, right? Mental sharpness is not simply about thinking faster. It's about creating a brain that remains adaptable, resilient, curious, capable, for decades. And by the end of this video, hopefully you'll understand why. So there's also one mistake that high-performing people make every day that quietly reduces their cognitive performance. We'll get there shortly. But first, welcome. I'm Heike Fallon. I'm the founder of Expand Health and the creator of the NeuroHP method. And I combine neuroscience, sports therapy, and personal performance coaching all together to help active people that are not willing to be limited optimize their health and performance for longevity. And over 30 years, I've studied the brain and body and their connection. And today I want to share 7 powerful ways to challenge your brain so it continues to learn, adapt, and perform. Before we go into it, make sure you grab my free PDF guide. Down in the description is a link. You can download it for free and check it out. So let's start with the common misunderstanding. Most people believe mental sharpness comes from accumulating knowledge. The more information you have, the sharper you become. But that's only part of the story, because your brain isn't designed to store information. Your brain is designed to adapt. Adaptation is real superpower. The ability to notice, interpret, respond, adjust, and learn. That's what keeps you sharp. In fact, some people know a tremendous amount and yet struggle with flexibility, creativity, and decision making. Others remain curious, engaged, adaptable well into their 70s, 80s, and beyond. The difference often isn't what they know, it's how frequently their brain is challenged to adapt, and that's important. A useful way to think about this is like hiking, for example. Imagine walking the exact same trail every single day. Eventually, you know every turn, every rock, every tree, and the experience becomes kind of predictable, efficient, comfortable, because that's what the brain is designed to do. Your brain loves efficiency. But efficiency can become a problem because the brain also thrives on novelty, on challenge, exploration, on learning. And when life becomes too predictable, the brain receives fewer reasons to change. And this matters for longevity because cognitive resilience depends on adaptability, not simple knowledge. And one question I often ask clients is, when was the last time you felt like a beginner? Most people pause because beginners feel uncomfortable, yet beginners learn. Beginners adapt, beginners create new neural connection. And that brings us to the first exercise. And that is literally do something with your non-dominant hand. So it's not necessarily about handwriting. It's really about adaptation. So you can try to write and draw with it. Or tomorrow morning, brush your teeth with your opposite hand. So I'm a right-hander, do it left hand. Pour your coffee, but be careful with your non-dominant hand. Notice what happens. Simple actions might feel very awkward. You're slower, you're less coordinated. But your intention increases, your awareness increases, and your brain becomes more engaged. Why? Because automatic patterns are being interrupted. When an activity becomes automatic, your brain uses less conscious attention. But when you introduce novelty, intention increases. And intention is one of the key drivers of neuroplasticity. In other words, the brain learns best when it pays attention. This exercise is not about becoming good with the opposite hand. It's about reminding your brain that adaptation matters. And there is an important longevity lesson here. People often assume aging means decline. But many declines are actually reduction in challenge, novelty, and engagement. Your brain responds to the demands placed upon it, which means small changes can create really meaningful benefits. Now here's the question. How many things do you do on autopilot every single day, right? You're driving, you're walking, you're eating, checking your phone. You don't even realize you're checking your phone sometimes. Working. What if some of your mental fatigue comes from living too much in automation, in automatic behaviors? That's something to consider, right? Now let's explore another misconception. Most people think mental sharpness begins inside the brain, but that's not entirely true. Mental sharpness begins actually with information. Your brain can only make as good as a decision with the information it receives. Inputs drive output. So think of it like a CEO running a company, right? Even the best CEO will make poor decisions if the reports arriving on the desk are incomplete. And your brain works kind of in the same way. It constantly gathers information from your body, from the environment, and then it creates predictions about what's going to happen next. The quality of those predictions depend largely on the quality of the information available, which brings us to exercise number 2. And this one is a room discovery challenge. This sounds simple, but don't underestimate it. Choose a room you enter every day, like your office or your living room, your kitchen, and then ask yourself, what have I stopped noticing? Spend a minute exploring the room as if you've never seen it before. I'll bet you'll find something. Notice certain textures, maybe colors, patterns, shadows, especially on different day and times, different shapes, where things are, maybe they move, details. Most people are surprised by how much they've overlooked. And why does this matter? Because intention is trainable. Observation is trainable. Awareness is trainable. And when you train observation, you improve the quality of information available to your brain. This isn't just about seeing better, it's about perceiving better. And perception influences performance in business, relationships, movement, health, really everywhere in life. And the people who often perform best aren't always the smartest. They are often the most observant. They are noticing what others miss. And that's a skill worth developing. And let me give you a quick example. Have you ever driven home and realized you barely remember the drive? It just kind of happened. Most people have. I have. And it's scary kind of when you realize it. The brain becomes efficient, predictable, automatic, useful sometimes, but not always. Mental sharpness requires periodic interruption of that autopilot. And that's exactly what we're training. Awareness, curiosity, adaptability, because a brain that remains curious is often a brain that remains engaged. And engagement is one of the strongest predictor of long-term cognitive vitality. In the next section, we'll look at the fascinating brain exercise that combines movement, decision-making, and adaptability. in a way that many people have never experienced before. And it may completely change how you think about sharpen your mind. So in this exercise, maybe one of the most valuable in modern life, not because it's difficult, but because it challenges something that quietly erodes in many people. Guess it? Attention. And attention is one of the most important resources you possess. Without attention, learning suffers, memory suffers, decision-making suffers, unfortunately, relationships suffer, and ultimately your ability to adapt suffers as well. So the challenge is that most people don't realize the attention being trained every day. The question is, so what is training it? Is it your phone, your notifications, constant interruption, or intentional experiences? Because whatever repeatedly captures attentions shapes attention. So that means we get really good at being distracted instead of paying attention. So here is exercise number 3. This is a movement exercise, but it's really an attention exercise. So I like you to ideally do this walking, actually from A to B, not in place, but let's say we're walking right now and you're going to choose a target in front. I'm going to use my camera here. And I want you to pay attention around you while you're keeping your focus on the target and see what you see around without losing focus on the target. So right now I can see my blinds on one side and keeping focus right here. Okay, keep walking while you're doing that because we're multitasking at the same time here, right? So pick out 3 things that you are recognizing around. Identify color and shapes, and really focus on those things as well as maintaining the focus to the original target. So notice what happens. You can stop now. Does it feel easy to stay focused, or is it that you find yourself kind of getting pulled away and things, your intention shifts back and forth? And that is really exactly the point, right? This is more than just a focus exercise. It's an adaptability exercise. The goal is awareness. You are learning how often your attention wanders. And that's valuable information. Why? Because mental sharpness isn't simply about concentrating harder. It's about noticing when that concentration leaves. This exercise trains voluntary attention and the ability to direct focus instead of constantly reacting. And in today's world, that may be one of the greatest cognitive advantages because we're all distracted. And the person who can sustain focus for meaningful periods often outperforms the person who is constantly distracted. Not because they're smarter, but because they can train and remain engaged. So here's a question. How much of your day do you spend responding rather directing? Emails, messages, alerts, requests, deadlines. I've got sucked into that. Many people feel mentally exhausted, not because they're doing too much, but because their attention is constantly being pulled. And a brain that always reacts has less capacity for creativity, problem solving, deep thinking. And this is one reason why sharpening your brain isn't about adding more information. It's about improving how you interact with that information. And that brings us to an important longevity connection. A sharp brain is not necessarily a busy brain. A sharp brain is often an adaptable brain that knows where to place attention. That skill becomes increasingly valuable as life becomes more complex. Several years ago, I worked with someone who described herself as mentally exhausted. She wasn't physically exhausted, wasn't lacking really motivation. It just simply felt scattered. She would start one task, then another, then another. At the end of the day, she felt super busy, but not productive. Sounds familiar? I've been there too. What we discovered wasn't a lack of intelligence, it wasn't a lack of effort, it wasn't the lack of intentional control. Her brain had become conditioned to constant switching. And constant switching comes with a cost. Every switch requires resource. Every interruption creates friction. Every unfinished thought occupies mental space. So instead of asking, how can I do more? We ask, how can I actually switch less? That small shift changed everything, not overnight, but gradually, because attention, like strengths, can be trained. And that realization became transformative because she stopped viewing herself as somebody with poor focus. She started understanding that her brain had simply adapted to the environment she repeatedly gave it. So that means make your environment more simple. For example, you do not have to have 20 tabs open on your computer. You put your phone away, turn off notification, and focus on just one task. And that is an important identity shift as well. You're not your habits. You're not your distractions. You're not your current level of focus. Your brain is adaptable, and adaptability creates possibility. Now let's talk a little deeper about prediction. Your brain is constantly predicting. In fact, much of what you experience is not a direct reflection of reality. It's your brain's best prediction of reality. Think about that. It kind of takes a little while. Your brain does not wait for information. It predicts what will happen, then compares its predictions to incoming information. This system helps us move efficiently, learn quickly, navigate complexity, but it also means the brain benefits from experience that challenges the predictions, which leads us to exercise number 4 or experience number 4, however you want it. This is a pattern interrupt. So this is an exercise that's a little bit more playful. And that's intentional because play is one of the most overlooked tools in neuroplasticity. And here's how it works. So choose one routine activity, something simple, walking, cooking, cleaning up, organizing your house. Then introduce a change. Walk in a different route. Rearrange maybe your workspace differently. Use different sequence. Change the order of familiar tasks that you do. The goal is not efficiency. The goal is disruption. Notice how quickly your brain wants to return to the familiar, right? Notice how often you think, oh, this feels so strange. Good. That's information because whenever you challenge your pattern, the brain must adapt. Adaptation requires attention. Attention supports learning, and learning supports resilience. Get in the loop, and resilience supports longevity. Many people unknowingly spend years protecting themselves from novelty. They seek comfort, predictability, just the same all the time. While routine is incredible, important, valuable, it reduces opportunities for adaptation. The healthiest systems are not those that never face challenges. The healthiest systems are those that successfully adapt to the challenges. That's true for muscle, that's true for balance, that's true for emotions, and it's true for your brain. Here's a simple reflection. When was the last time you intentionally did something simply because it challenged your brain? Not because you were good at it, not because you needed to, but because you created novelty. Many adults don't do things like that. Children do. Children naturally explore, experiment, play, adapt. And that's one reason their brain learns so quickly. So the lesson isn't becoming like childish here. The lesson is to remain curious because curiosity keeps the brain engaged and engagement supports lifelong learning. So stay curious, keep doing with that. And one of the biggest myths about aging isn't that decline is inevitable. Now, let's be clear, aging is real, change is real, but adaptation is also real. And often people underestimate how much influence they still have. The brain is not static. It responds, it learns, it reorganizes, it adapts. And one of the most powerful things you can do for long-term cognitive health is continue providing reason for adaptation. That doesn't mean doing these extreme things. It means staying engaged, learning, exploring, moving, paying attention, learning something new, right? Remaining curious. Explore, do something new because a brain that continuously adapts often remains more capable for longer. So up to this point, we've talked about attention, adaptation, prediction, and curiosity. But now I want to introduce something that many people never associate with mental sharpness. That's awareness. because before your brain can make a good decision, it first has to notice. And noticing is becoming increasingly rare. Think about it. How often are you fully present with your environment, with your body, with your thoughts, with your people around you? Many people are physically present, but mentally elsewhere. They are replaying yesterday, planning tomorrow, solving problems, worrying, scrolling, consuming, reacting. Yet some of those sharpest minds I've ever encountered share one common trait. They notice. They notice patterns, they notice details, they notice changes, they notice opportunities, and they notice themselves, which brings us to exercise number 5. And this is called Sensory Mapping Challenge. This exercise takes only a few minutes, yet can reveal how much information you routinely miss. So you can stand up or sit comfortable and we're going to begin with your vision, right? So I want you to notice 5 things that you may have not noticed before. So you can look around and see 5 things. Notice their texture, their pattern, their color variation, and just kind of paying attention to and notice them. The next one is, I want you to pay attention to 4 sounds. Maybe you hear a bird, maybe a dog, maybe the refrigerator, whatever it be. So pay attention and listen to the sounds around you. Give you a little time. And then the last one is, I want you to do 3 things that you can feel. So I'm standing, I'm not having shoes on, so I can feel the ground very well. I can feel the shirt on my skin, for example. So kind of sense, you might actually, temperature is another one. I can feel the temperature of the room here right now. So 3 things that you can feel. So now ask yourself, what changed when I started paying attention actually? Most people discover that their environment became kind of more richer, detailed, more alive. Why? Because awareness increased. And awareness is one of the foundations of adaptability. The brain cannot adapt to information that it never noticed, right? So this matters far beyond exercise because awareness influences your decision making, your relationships, leadership, safety, learning, performance, and longevity. Imagine driving. Would you rather have a driver who notices everything or one who notices very little? The answer is obvious, right? Yet many people move through life with attention on only a very little fraction of what is available. And the goal is not, being hyper-vigilance. The goal is really flexibility, the ability to direct your awareness as you need it, and that is really trainable. And here's something fascinating. 2 people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different conclusions. Why? Because perception shapes reality and not reality itself. Perception. Your brain is constantly deciding what deserves attention, what matters, what doesn't matter, what feels important, what feels threatening, what feels safe. And those decisions influence everything that follows. So this is why people can attend the same meeting, have the same conversation, or face the same challenges and interpret it differently. Mental sharpness is not simply about accumulating information, it's about improving the quality and perception. And exercise number 6, we're going to do exactly that. So this is one of my favorite ones because it trains cognitive flexibility. Choose an everyday problem. Notice, nothing major. Maybe how you organize your workspace, how you structure your day, how you prepare your meal, or how you solve a small challenge, right? Then ask yourself, how many solutions can I create? Not the best solution, not the fastest solution, multiple solutions. Come up with like 5 or 10 or 15 and keep going. Initially, most people stop after 2 or 3, but something interesting happens when you continue. The brain begins exploring, expanding, experimenting, creating. And that is valuable because we don't want to be rigid in our cognitive capabilities. So people often become attached to one way. I'm getting sucked into that. It's one approach, one routine, one answer, one perspective that, again, can be good, but yet adaptability often comes from seeing possibilities, not certainties. Think about leaders, athletes, entrepreneurs, people who thrive through change. One of their greatest strengths is often flexibility. They can pivot, adjust, reframe, adapt, and that isn't merely a personality trait, it's a trainable skill. And exercise like this help reinforce that. So instead of asking, why is this happening? And start really more asking, what are my options? That question alone creates possibilities, and possibilities change behavior. Behavior changes outcome, outcome shapes confidence. Confidence creates momentum. And that is one reason cognitive flexibility matters for longevity, because life changes, circumstances changes, health changes, relationship change, and the people who adapt best are often the people who remain open to new possibilities. And at this point, I want to challenge something many people believe. Some people say, oh, I'm just forgetful. Oh, I'm just not focused. I'm not creative. I'm too old to learn new things. Maybe your brain has simply adapted to the experiences you've already repeatedly given it. And that's a very different story, because one story creates limitation, the other creates opportunity. Remember, your current state is not necessarily your potential, it's often your adaptation. And adaptation can change. And that's one of the most hopeful things we know about the brain. Not overnight, not instantly, but through consistent, meaningful experiences. And this is one reason I love brain-based training, because it shifts people from the helplessness to possibilities, from fear to curiosity, from limitation to really exploration. And when that shift happens, everything becomes different and changing. Now let's zoom out. Why are we talking about all this? Why do attention, awareness, adaptation, and flexibility matter? Because longevity is not simply about adding years, it's about preserving capability and ability to think, to learn, to move, to decide, to connect, to create, to contribute, and to really enjoy life. Many people focus on lifespan. I think health span deserves equal attention. How capable do you want to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? The answer depends in part on the demands you place on your brain today. And that leads us to the final exercise, an exercise that combines many of the principles we've discussed throughout this video. And perhaps more importantly, it helps answer a question every active person should be asking. How do I continue building adaptability for the future? So again, so far we talked awareness, adaptation, prediction, curiosity, and cognitive flexibility, and hopefully you begin to see the pattern. Mental sharpness is not one thing. It's not memory alone. It's not intelligence alone. It's not knowledge alone. Mental sharpness is a result of multiple systems working together. Attention, perception, learning, decision-making, adaptation, and the ability to continually update your understanding of yourself and the world around you. So that finally brings us to the final exercise, number 7. And this is perhaps the simplest exercise in the entire video, and potentially one of the most powerful. Once per week, create a novelty day. Not an extreme day, not an expensive day, just a novelty day. The goal is to simply intentionally expose yourself to a new experience. Try a new route, visit a new place, read something outside your normal interest, learn a skill, take a class, listen to unfamiliar music, or explore a different environment. Start a conversation with someone new and experience something your brain cannot predict. Like, the key word here is intentional, because many people wait for novelty to happen. But sharp minds often seek it. They create it. They pursue it. They invite it. Why does it matter? Because novelty captures attention. Attention drives learning. Learning supports adaptation. I know you've heard that again before. Adaptation strengthens resilience, and resilience supports longevity. Think about the people that you admire most, the people who remain vibrant, engaged, interesting later in life. What do they often have in common? Curiosity. And they're still learning, they're still exploring, they're growing, they're asking questions, they're still interested in life. And that matters because a brain that remains curious often remains adaptable. So longevity is not about a collection of health strategies like nutrition, exercise, sleep, recovery. All of those important, very important, but sometimes we overlook something equally valuable. That's the mental adaptability, because life will continue changing, technology will change, your environment will change, your responsibilities will change, your body will change, and the question becomes, can you adapt? Can you learn? Can you adjust? Can you remain engaged? Those qualities may be some of the greatest assets for long-term health and performance, because adaptability creates that option. And options create freedom, and the brain that can adapt is often the brain that continues thriving despite challenges. So that doesn't mean life becomes easier. It means you become capable, and that's the difference. If there's one thing I hope you remember from today's video, that is a sharp brain is not necessarily a brain that knows more. It's often a brain that remains adaptable, a brain that remains curious, a brain that continues to learn, and a brain that continues engaging with life. And perhaps the most importantly, a brain that continues seeking meaningful experiences, because your brain doesn't simply respond to age, it responds to use, to challenge, to attention, to learning, to adaptation. And that should be encouraging, because it means you have influence. Maybe more influence than you realize. And that influence begins with small decisions, small experiences, small challenges, repeated consistently over time. Before we finish here, I want you to consider one question. Which one of the 7 exercises will you try first? You can't do all 7, just one, because action always beats intention. Knowledge without action changes very little. And, a single action repeated consistently can create remarkable change over time. So choose one, try it, observe what happens, stay curious, stay engaged, stay adaptable. Your future self will thank you. And if you like this video and you think someone else could benefit from it, please share it with them. Subscribe to my channel. I release a new video every week. And do something for yourself. Go out, be curious, explore, and start investing in yourself. I'm Heike Fallon. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next episode.